What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the most electrifying podcast in sports betting entertainment. My name is G Money Grant Mitchell. No, I do not refer to myself as that, but my co-host Tanner Kerr normally does. And since he is not here to do his intro, I felt obligated to do it for him. Guys, this is the second day of the week where Tanner is still out doing amazing things, okay? We're not here to give him a hard time. Tanner is currently running 220 miles from Boston to New York for the Tunnels to Towers Foundation, the cause. I don't know what the exact term is, but it's for the victims of 9/11, the first responders, all of that stuff. So he's doing something very cool, very important. As I mentioned in the last episode, if any of you so desire or you have the means to, please go over to his page, consider donating to him while he's on his journey. I know he's raised close to $10,000 already, and that is pretty amazing. Just to lend you guys some insight on what he is doing, he was running, I think, either 33 or 36 miles per day for the first 4 days, and then it was 30 miles yesterday, and I think he's down to the 20s for the final 2 days. It's pretty funny. We were joking yesterday, me and him over text, that he's on the 20-mile days, and those are the short days. It's remarkable what he's doing. I can't imagine the pain that he's putting himself through. But again, guys, one final time, if you have the means, please go over, donate to him while he is out on his journey. Okay, that's enough housekeeping out of the way. Tanner will be back next week, but for now, just me solo. But I'm still going to be here to talk about what we've got going on in the NBA. You know, we've got some really interesting stuff. We got some game sevens, maybe some game sevens on the horizon. We got betting picks coming out tonight. We got the NFL schedule release. We got it all. But before we jump into that, you guys know what to do. Hit that like button already. I'll just go ahead and like it. We know you're going to like the rest of the video, and hit that subscribe button so you are locked in for more future episodes of Ride the Line. Now, I know the title and thumbnail probably say something about the NFL schedule release. We're going to get to that later on, but we are going to start it off by talking about the NBA, and we're going to talk about the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves, because my goodness, for this to be as competitive of a series as it is, this is just straight up one of the weirdest series that I can remember seeing in a long time, especially a 7-game series. Let's go through this one by one. So in game 1, we have the road underdog win by 7. In game 2, we have the road underdog win by 26. In game 3, the road underdog wins by 17. In game 4, the road underdog wins by 8. Then the Nuggets go home. They win by 15. You think, okay, they kicked it into gear. They're just going to, they go down 0-2, but they're going to sweep them from that point on. This is going to be a 4-2. No, the Timberwolves, they go back home for game 6, and they win by 45 points. That is the largest win in an elimination game since the 1950s. It's the second largest in NBA history. And again, it came against the defending champions. This is just such a weird series. And look, this was a huge win for Minnesota, obviously, because not only did it save their series hopes, they have so much momentum going back on the road. You heard Anthony Edwards at that podium. They asked him after the game to confirm a rumor. He said, yes, it's true. When we left Denver after game 5, I told them, I'll see y'all back here for game 7. First of all, it's hard not to love Ant, okay? His press conferences are always gold, and he seems to have developed into a real leader for this team. But when he's making statements like that, and then they go home and they win by 45 freaking points, it's hard to put into words just what this means for Minnesota, and also how much of an embarrassment this is for Denver. Let's not get this twisted. This is an embarrassing series for the Denver Nuggets, regardless of if they win the game 7 or not. I don't care what happens. Is it fine for a defending champion to be taken to a game 7? Sure. Is it fine for a defending champion to go 7 games with a very young team with a 22-year-old leader? You know what? It happens. Is it okay for the defending champs to lose by 45 in a closeout game? Absolutely not. It is just not okay. And you know what? This does more damage to Nikola Jokic, because Jokic was bad in the first 2 games of the series, but then the next 3, he was just sensational. And it was one of those moments where, okay, is Jokic not going to be a one-hit wonder, but maybe from a playoff standpoint, is it just that year that he had? Oh, no, turns out he's still really good. And, when he faces adversity, I think this was the biggest thing. I think that Jokic wasn't getting criticized to the same level of other all-time greats. And so it was this boiling point of when he faces adversity, does he fold? No, he's just going to bounce back and win 3 straight games and be spectacular in all of them. He had the 40 points, 13 assists, 7 rebounds, no turnovers in game 5. Like, he was just out of his mind. But then in this game, he was still the best player on the Nuggets, but I mean, that's not saying much when they play as poorly as they did. I mean, he was a minus 28 in this game. He had 22 points, 9 rebounds. Again, those are okay numbers. Like, you would love that from Michael Porter Jr., but from the Jokic, the best player in the world, it can't happen. Meanwhile, on the other side, we talked about this in the last episode, guys. Look, I'm not saying Anthony Edwards is the best player in the world, because I don't believe that. But if the Timberwolves win this series, let's think about it. He has been the best player in the playoffs. I don't think that's up for question. If you want to look at in this series, it's been either him or Jokic. I think they've all been the best player on the court in the games they won, and it's 3-3. So if the Timberwolves win the series, let's just say that Anthony Edwards is better than Jokic in the game 7, well, then you're going to see Ant as the best player in the playoffs, the best player in this series. He's going to have taken out the defending champions with the best player in the world, and they're going to be favored against the Thunder or the Mavericks, so there's a good chance they make it to the finals. So I wouldn't say Ant is the best player in the world, but he would have the argument to say he is, just from what he's accomplished so far. He was incredible in this game. I mean, he was a plus 43. He was a plus 43 in 34 minutes. He scored 27 points. Could have scored more if he played more, but the game didn't call for that. Had 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. Him accepting the defensive challenge at different points, he's taken the challenge of defending Jamal Murray. You saw that again in this game. And between Ant and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels, I mean, they have Jamal Murray in hell. In this game, he goes 4 of 18 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3, finishes with 10 points and 5 assists. I know I was bagging on Jokic. Jamal Murray is such an anomaly because he is one of the few not all NBA level players that consistently get better in the playoffs. As a matter of fact, I think he has the highest increase from regular season to postseason scoring. So even though you don't look at Jamal Murray as an all NBA player or even an all-star during the regular season, you look at him as a guy you should be able to count on in the playoffs. And he just hasn't really been that in the playoffs. He had 2 game winners against the Lakers, but overall, he still wasn't that good in that series. And he's been really bad in this one. The one good game he had was in game 3, I believe it was, when there were 3 days of rest between the games. They played game 2 on Monday. They played game 3 on Friday. That was the only game where he looked good. And maybe that boils back to the calf injury because he had more time to rest and recuperate. But, again, as I said, he just has not looked good so far. If we look at some of the betting odds, for this series, going back to Denver for a game 7 here. The odds makers at FanDuel Sportsbook have the Nuggets as 4.5-point favorites, so you can get them at minus 4.5. Obviously, the Timberwolves plus 4.5. The Nuggets are minus 188 on the money line. The Timberwolves are plus 158, and we've got a total set at 197.5. Before the series started, I said a couple of things. I said if the Nuggets are going to be, if they're going to play at their best, they will win this series in 6 games. If they're going to be lackadaisical, this thing's going 7, and the Timberwolves have a great chance to win. I think you have seen that prove to be true. I mean, the Nuggets probably should have, maybe not should have isn't the word, but if they played at the same level they did in games 3, 4, and 5, they win this series in 6 games. But they were lackadaisical in game 2. They were lackadaisical in game 6, this one that just happened. And so the series is going 7. I would love to see the Timberwolves win this game, not because I have any vendetta against Denver or anything, but just because I don't like complacency. I don't like entitlement. And between how Michael Malone getting in the face of the officials and berating them, Jokic, again, he's been great in a few games, but he's also been really bad in others. And I just don't like how whiny he looks at times. There's the ball goes out of bounds and he does the long face and he sticks his arm out and runs over to the officials. I just don't like that. I don't like Jamal Murray throwing his heating pad out onto the court. I don't like how poorly he's been playing. And this Timberwolves team, think about them last year. Everybody said the Rudy Gobert trade was a disaster. You've got your best player who's 22 years old, a team and a franchise that really haven't accomplished anything in the playoffs in decades, beyond that even. I would just love to see the Timberwolves win this game. That being said, I don't think they will. I think Denver does bounce back. I think they win. I'm not taking them on the spread. I can't trust them to win this game, so I'm certainly not trusting them to cover 4.5. But if I had to put my life on it, I would probably take Denver. Again, they've looked better they looked better in the middle of the series, and I think they can tap into that more. I do think the Timberwolves made some great adjustments. Don't get me wrong. I loved how they were trying to deal with the Jamal Murray getting downhill. They had Karl-Anthony Towns doing almost like a half hedge, so Murray couldn't go straight into the floater. They picked up the intensity, their full court defense. They're playing with more purpose in the half court. It's a good series. It's a really good series. I've enjoyed watching every second of it. I think Denver wins game 7, but I honestly hope they don't, because they don't deserve to, with the way that they've kind of carried themselves throughout the series. The game that we've got going on Friday night, we got the New York Knicks against the Indiana Pacers. This is another very interesting series because in games 1 and 2, it looked like, wow, the Knicks could maybe sweep these guys. Indiana presented some challenges and they looked a lot better than most people expected, and they still lost both of those games. But then you go back to Indy and the Pacers win, they handedly win game 3, and then they just demolish the Knicks in game 4. And you go back to New York and the Knicks demolish the Pacers back in game 5. So it's just this series of swings, just huge back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's what makes it so interesting. The Knicks are up 3-2 going into this game 6. Indy trying to force a road game 7 here. What I'm going to be keeping my eye on, and the player I'm going to keep my eye on, and no, it's not Jalen Brunson. No, it's not Tyrese Halliburton, although we are going to talk about him in just a moment. It's Miles McBride. It's Deuce McBride. And the reason for that being, when you look at the Knicks injuries, Julius Randle, Bojan Bogdanovic, OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, and then, of course, Jalen Brunson's injured, but he's playing through the foot injury. Tom Thibodeau opted to replace OG and, all his predecessors with Precious Achiuwa in starting lineup. That wasn't working out, the double big lineup, even though Achiuwa is a versatile defender. The double big lineup wasn't working. The Pacers were creating too much pace and space. And so he puts Deuce McBride in the starting lineup. And then they go into game 5, and McBride finishes that game with 17 points, 4 assists, plays tremendous defense, and the Knicks just looked a lot better. That was the first time in this series they held the Pacers below 111 points, and they held them to 91. So they held them 20 points lower than the other lowest scoring game of the series. And that it was reminiscent of what you saw from the Knicks during the regular season, because they had a pretty dominant defense during the regular season that they just lost touch with when they got to the playoffs. And you can say that was because they're being asked to play so many minutes, or the injuries, or the level of competition increased. Whatever it was, New York was actually surviving with its offense. But then they finally, they turn the years back, so to speak, even though it was only a couple of months ago, and they get back to those defensive principles that they had during the regular season, and you saw the result. I mean, they blew the Pacers out by 30 points. So McBride is a player to watch. Halliburton, though, like I mentioned, we were going to talk about him. Let's talk about him now. Halliburton, you also got to keep your eye on, because I don't want to say he single-handedly controls what happens in this series, but he certainly has a lot of authority over it. If you want to look at the Pacers throughout these playoffs, in games where Halliburton attempts at least 15 field goals, so 15 shot attempts, he and the Pacers are 5-1. In games where he does not attempt 15 or more shots, they are 1-4. Now, that's not so much that they need him to score 30 points per game. This isn't a Jalen Brunson situation where he's got to score 30 to 40. This isn't, I don't know who else is backpacking their team. This isn't a Donovan Mitchell situation, although the Cavaliers are gone from the playoffs. It's not one of those where they need him to score the volume of points. They just need him to be more aggressive to open up the whole Pacers offense. Because what he does in those games where he's not shooting as much, he gets to the pick and roll or a dribble handoff, whatever. It's just common offensive actions, whatever it might be. And he's always looking to make the pass. And so the Knicks don't have to honor him. They don't have to send doubles, or they don't have to show more help in his direction if he's just going to get off of the ball. Because even though he's had this huge shooting slump ever since he got injured with that hamstring problem back in January, he's still the best player on the Pacers. So for him to just completely take his foot off of the gas and say, Aaron Nesmith, you go do it. Miles Turner or Andrew Nembhard, why don't you carry us to victory? It's just not going to work. And honestly, a part of the reason why I think the Pacers' second unit has been so successful in this series is the way that TJ McConnell is playing. He's still a great assist man too, don't get me wrong, but he wants to attack the lane often. And he's, whether it's layups or going underneath the basket, the little Nash cut or the Nash dribble, or whether he's getting to a floater, a mid-range, whatever it is, he's putting more pressure on the rim. Now, Tyrese Halliburton isn't a huge driver of the ball. He still loves to do most of his damage from the outside. But even if he can mix in some of those drives, even if they don't go in, it's just the fact that the Knicks defense has to become a little more compact. And when you have the pace and space the Pacers have, that opens up so much for Halliburton and for the team as a whole. So I do think this is a very interesting game. What I do find very interesting, actually, is the Pacers are favored by 6 points here. They're favored by 6 points despite being down 3-2. Now, of course, that a lot of that has to do with them being at home, but it's just weird considering, again, the ebbs and flow of this series, how New York has probably acquitted itself to be the better team. For the Pacers to be favored by 6 shows the odds makers are really expecting this thing to go 7. Do I think the Pacers can win this game? Absolutely. I mean, you can't argue with what they did in their building. They're 5-0 in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, their home arena, in the playoffs. So they've been a different beast at home. That being said, I'm not laying the 6 points. I'm not going to do it. I don't give a damn that they blew the Knicks out the last time they played them in Indiana. What you see from this Knicks team, every time you count them out, they have something. They have something to bounce back with. And look, like I said, I'm not guaranteeing that they win this game. I'm not going to guarantee they win this series, even though I expect them to. But I do think the plus six with the Knicks, sorry, it's a tongue twister. The plus 6 with the Knicks, I think that's the better side to be on than the Pacers. Obviously, we've got one other series left. This one is going to be played on Saturday, potentially wrapped up on Saturday. We've got the OKC Thunder going against the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks find themselves with a 3-2 lead. Luka Doncic finally looked a lot better, a lot more efficient in Game 5. That was a driving force in why the Mavericks were able to take the lead. I said it before this series started, I liked the Mavericks to win, but I liked the Thunder to win Game 1. I probably could have gotten away with placing one of those bets. Probably would have got, I don't know, like +5, +600 odds or something to say Thunder win Game 1, Mavericks win the series. That's what I expected to happen. Do I think that the Thunder are going to win win Game 6 and force a Game 7? I think it's certainly possible, but with Dallas going home, even though OKC is one of the best road teams in basketball, with Dallas going home, they're much better in their building. And you got to keep in mind, even Luka was good last game, but PJ Washington took a step back. Kyrie Irving has not had a very good game in this entire series, and I still trust him. This is still one of the leading scorers in the fourth quarter, still the guy who hit one of the 2 best shots in NBA playoff history. I just think the Mavericks, they finally found their momentum. They're going back to their building. OKC's lack of experience is sort of being exposed to a certain extent. We've seen them have to make lineup changes. Josh Giddey goes to the bench. Isaiah Joe gets the start, plays a lot of first half minutes, but then doesn't play a whole lot in the second half. You're seeing the OKC approach, the drive and kick. Dallas has had some answers for it with what they've been able to do with the rotation of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. OKC is also leaving the corners open a lot. That's why Dallas has been able to make so many threes in this series. And if you want to play the percentage game with Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington, because they're not high percentage shooters, you feel free, but these are the consequences when you leave them open and they make their shots. You find yourself in a 3-2 hole. So I'm looking at the Mavericks to win this game. Would I lay the 4 points? Probably. I don't love it. I definitely don't love it. I much prefer to take them on the money line, but the odds aren't great there, so I get that. And I would probably be willing to lay the 4 points with the Mavericks. I think they get that series done, and that sets up a conference finals between Dallas and either Minnesota or Denver. And then on the other side, I'm expecting, whether it's Game 6, Game 7, to have Knicks versus Celtics. And those would be some fun series. Those would be competitive. I think the Celtics, what are the Celtics now? I got to look at what they are in odds. They're minus 155 to win the title. They just continue to grow. I just don't trust them to win the finals because I haven't seen them win the big games. And I haven't seen anything even in regular season or playoff games to make me believe that those problems they have down the stretch have changed. They've got the Dan Hurley UConn type thing going on where Dan Hurley was asked, why does your team or how does it feel to have won so many games by the largest margin of victory in tournament history, blah, blah, blah. And Dan Hurley said, well, we're really bad at winning close games, so we got to take the alternative and blow everyone out. It feels like that's what Boston is doing right now. And if they can do that all the way through the NBA Finals, more power to them. But I just don't trust them. I do expect them to beat the Knicks, and maybe that's what the odds makers are taking into account because whether it's Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, it's kind of a coin flip on who's going to come out over there. But I think you see the Celtics having a clear advantage over the Knicks. So that's probably the reason for the odds being what they are. But we'll wait and see, guys. I mean, that's all we can do at this point. Let's move it on over to the NFL because we do have odds released for week 1 and a couple of games beyond that. But NFL week 1, the schedule release happened on Wednesday. We got a banger of a matchup on opening night, the Ravens versus the Chiefs. We talked about this on the last episode, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm not placing any bets until a few days before the game. And I highly recommend you guys do the same. If you want to place your futures bets, okay, that's different. But the actual game bets, no. Let's wait to see where the injuries are. Let's wait to see if there are any more trades or free agent signings or developments on the field, whatever. Like, we don't know if the Chiefs' number 1 wide receiver is going to be available to play. We don't know if he's going to be legally a free man by the time that this game starts. So just wait it out. See what happens. I like the Ravens +3 tentatively. We'll see where we're at in a couple of months. Some of the other games that we got in week 1, though, the Green Bay Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles, that should be a very good game. You got the Eagles at -1 there, so basically a pick 'em. The Packers are a very popular team to make some noise in the NFC, potentially even win it this year. What I would warn everybody, just issue a word of warning. When you look at the Houston Texans and the Green Bay Packers, those are the 2 best examples of teams that are young and overachieved last year and have promise moving forward with great quarterbacks. Progression in the NFL is not always linear. It's not usually a straight line. So one of those 2 teams, the Texans or the Packers, I'm expecting to probably take a step back. I would almost be a little more inclined to say it is the Packers just because, I'm not saying that JJ McCarthy is the future of the NFL or anything, but because you're going to have, I don't know, better than Nick Mullins quarterback level play coming from Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, obviously, is back. That defense has gotten better. They have Josh Jacobs now as well. Not Josh Jacobs, sorry, Aaron Jones. Then you look at the Bears. They get Caleb Williams in this explosive offense. I would think the Packers could take a step back just by virtue of their division. And I would probably take Philly in this game. It's a pick 'em, but I would take Philly. Then we've got the Jaguars and the Dolphins starting it off on Sunday. Dolphins 3.5-point favorites over there. You got the Steelers at +2.5 against the Falcons. I think that's an interesting spot potentially to go with the Steelers. It's going to be Kirk Cousins' first game back from a torn Achilles at 36 years old. First game with a new team, new head coach and all that. I think I like the Steelers there. You're not getting the full 3 points, but still, I would probably take the Steelers honestly on the money line. There's not a huge point in taking them at +2.5. I would take them probably the money line. You got the Cardinals +7 against the Buffalo Bills there. That could end up being a pretty good game, honestly, just because we don't quite know what we're going to see from Kyler Murray because he's had so much up and downs. Also, Jonathan Gannon, the coach that was hired last year, I think he never really got to make an imprint on his team just because they were so bad, honestly. Over on Marvin Harrison Jr. in this game. This is going to be the weakest Buffalo secondary that we've seen in the last half decade. MHJ, they're going to get him the ball. I'm guessing the odds makers are going to start him out with a line of 80, 90 yards early on, but I'm expecting 100+ yards in his debut. We got the Patriots +8.5 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow is back. I'm taking the Bengals -8.5 in this one. The Patriots they're just not a very good team. Apparently they've got They're realizing Drake May might not be where they thought he was. The selling point of the team was the defense, and you're getting Matthew Judon and Christian Gonzalez back. I get that, but it's also Gerard Mayo's first year as a coach. You're entering the year thinking whatever you're going to get as far as wins and success is going to be on the back of that defense. But how much of that was Bill Belichick? I mean, he's only the greatest defensive mind in the history of football. If he's no longer in the building, what effect is that going to have? Your offense, you don't have great skill positions, you don't have a good line, and your quarterback's a 21-year-old rookie who isn't where you want him to be. I like the Bengals in that one. Titans versus Bears. Bears 4.5-point favorites here. Interesting spot. I probably the Titans on the spread for me, just because it's Caleb Williams' NFL debut. It might take a little to come together. I don't know. That's a game that's weird. The Vikings +1 against the Giants. Probably take the Vikings. The Giants are awful. Daniel Jones stinks. I've been saying it for years. I've been called a Giants hater. Like, you're the New York Giants, okay? You're irrelevant. We don't care about you. I'm a Commanders fan. Literally has nothing to do with it. If I was a hater, you could say that about the Cowboys or the Eagles. There's nothing to hate about the Giants. I don't care. They don't make any noise. The Texans versus the Colts. This is an interesting game because people forget the Colts were one dropped third down away from winning the AFC South last year, and they would be the ones who played the Ravens in the playoffs. It wouldn't have been the Texans. So this is going to be an interesting game. The Colts are at home. I would still go with the Texans just because of some of the upgrades they made in the offseason. Also, Anthony Richardson going to be back under center, and considering he only played 4 games last year, he's been out for a while. You got the Panthers at +5 against the New Orleans Saints. Both teams are terrible. I would probably take the Saints. Raiders, Chargers could be a potentially good game there. I would take the Chargers in -3. I think Harbaugh is going to institute some control of the trenches and on the ground game. I don't like Vegas's offense with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. The Denver Broncos +4.5 against the Seattle Seahawks. Another interesting game. I'm very interested to see what effect Mike McDonald, the new head coach of the Seahawks, has on their defense, because we have seen their offense be explosive in the past, but it's normally their defense that lets them down. I would look at Seattle to get a result here. I don't like Bo Nix. He was good last year in college, don't get me wrong, but for a guy to have played more snaps and more games than any other player in college football history, I just don't think he has that much room to grow. And so I don't, if this was like, if Drake May had Bo Nix's performances and stats, well, that would be totally different. But I feel like we've seen kind of what we're going to see from Bo Nix. I don't think there's much more to tap into. Maybe the best game of the opening week as far as what we saw from based on last year, the Cowboys at -0.5 against the Cleveland Browns. So this one really is a pick 'em. Very interesting. Going to come down to the quarterbacks. Does Dak Prescott have enough help? And then vice versa. Can Deshaun Watson be the help to the team? The rest of the Browns team got Super Bowl level production from like every position aside from quarterback. So pressure's on Deshaun this year. The Washington Commanders +3.5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers -3.5. I expect Tampa Bay to win this game. Don't know if I would lay the full 3.5. I think Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. are going to be able to bring some cool things to that defense. A lot of this also just does come down to Jaden Daniels. He's a rookie making his debut. What's that going to look like? I would probably take the Buccaneers to win if I had to, but I think I like the Commanders at +3.5 just a little more, just because I don't think Tampa Bay is going to blow anybody out to start the year. You got the Rams and the Lions on the Sunday night game, a rematch of the NFC wild card last year. The Lions ended the Rams season. Another game that, is potentially could be a foreshadowing of things to come in the playoffs if they do match up again. I mean, the Rams won 7 of their 8 final games before they did lose to the Lions. Matthew Stafford was playing at a very elite level. You've seen them make some upgrades to that defense, namely Tre'Davious White joining the secondary. Obviously, Aaron Donald is gone, but Donald didn't have a tremendous year last year. I suppose you could say that it impacts the way that opponents are going to block them, because you're not going to have guys getting single coverage. They're single blocking on the line anymore. I'm kind of rambling at this point. I think you still go with the Lions there just because we saw what they did last year. And then the Monday night game, the New York Jets +5.5 against the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are clearly the much better team in every area. I'm not buying into this Jets team, not until I see it at least. Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old, coming off of a torn Achilles. He has not played good football in 2.5 years. I'm just not buying it. I'm not buying that this is the miracle season. I'm not buying this is the turnaround. Give me the Niners -5.5. Guys, that is going to do it for this episode of Ride the Line. Before you get on out of here, please do me the favor. I just sat here and talked to you for 30 minutes on my own. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button so you're locked in for more future episodes. Drop some comments. Let me know who you are going to be betting on in the NBA this weekend, and drop some comments for Tanner. Go to his page, donate, wish him luck, tweet him congratulations, whatever it is. Just show him some support. You'll find links down in the description below. Guys, I'm going to head on out of here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Ride the Line. We will catch you all next week with the return of Tanner Kern.